In the 19th century, match factory workers across the United States fell victim to a condition known as Phossy Jaw. Because of the manufacturing conditions, factory workers began to exhibit osteonecrosis of the jaw. The epidemic produced pain, swelling, and areas of exposed bone, all of which trace back to the match. In 1827, John Walker created the friction match using white phosphorus, and by 1835, several match factories were established in the United States. The following industrial boom of the Strike Anywhere match led to domination in the market, widespread popularity, and consequently a monopoly on phosphorus matches. In 1839, the first case of phosphorus poisoning was diagnosed by Dr. Lorenzer in Vienna. All attempts to replace white phosphorus matches with a safer alternative were ineffective due to the popularity of its Strike Anywhere feature. And while customers were left unaffected with the use of the matches, the factory workers had a very different experience. Based on a match factory in Minnesota in 1900, about 180 pounds of the poisonous phosphorus were used daily. Separated from the rest of the factory with a door, mixers and assistants used 2 giant kettles in the phosphorus mixing rooms. With no special apparatus to expel the visible fumes, the windows were the only means of ventilation in the room. With a door between the 2 areas, the space used for dipping, drying, and boxing matches continued production. During a 2-day observation, the doors were left open wide and you could cut the fumes in the factory with a knife. In 1899, London released a 250-page report on the effects of phosphorus in matchmaking. The United States of America was the only country listed without any rules and regulations for the process. Before the nation was aware of the hazardous associations with working with yellow or white phosphorus, all aspects of the matchstick industry were threatened by the dangers of the phosphorus poisoning. In addition to poor ventilation, employees were often required to remain at their station for the entire day, which also meant that the matchstick makers, dippers, and boxers were exposed to prolonged ingestion of phosphorus vapors. Early symptoms of Phossy Jaw emerged as minor toothaches and slight swelling of the gums, but progressed into more vicious ailments such as bone abscesses, glowing jawbones, discharge, and brain damage. Additionally, if the diseased bone was not surgically removed, the affected individual would eventually die from organ failure. Despite the obvious occupational hazards associated with white or yellow phosphorus matchstick production, the American industry refused to halt its production. By the turn of the century, lawmakers could no longer ignore the issue of Phossy Jaw or the threat that white phosphorus posed to the matchstick factory workers. The significant turning point in eliminating the white phosphorus match occurred in 1906 when the International Association for Labor Legislation led an international conference in Bern, Switzerland. An agreement to prohibit the manufacture, importation, and sale of white phosphorus matches was agreed upon by Finland, Denmark, France, Switzerland, Luxembourg, Italy, and Germany. As a result, sequesulfide, a safer chemical alternative, was substituted. American factory workers looked to these overseas industrial triumphs with hope, but by 1910, still nothing had been done to prevent phosphorus poisoning in American factories. Many factory owners resisted switching to the non-toxic alternative because it was more expensive than white phosphorus, although American Association for Labor Legislation Secretary John Andrews estimated that the cost amounted to about 5 cents. Other manufacturers claimed willingness to switch to sequesulfide, but only on the grounds that the United States government would implement uniform legislation to apply to all manufacturers to avoid giving the competition an unfair advantage. The American Association for Labor was formed in 1906 and would champion the matchstick factory workers before Congress in addition to other industrial health concerns. After extensive lobbying by this group, in June 1910, Representative John J. Esch introduced what would later become known as the Match Act before Congress. It was eventually passed in 1912. Interestingly, the S-phosphorus bill did not ban the use of white phosphorus in factories, as this would have conflicted with individual state regulations. Instead, the Match Act placed a tax on boxes of matches that were made with white phosphorus rather than sequesulfide. This discouraged customers from purchasing said matches and compelled manufacturers to use the non-toxic alternative in their factories. Following this bill, only a few cases of the disease have been reported to this day. This encounter with Phossy Jaw exemplifies the poor manufacturing conditions employed by many business owners looking to maximize their profit margins. It took several afflicted individuals to push legislative action in order to put a stop to these toxic working conditions. Phossy Jaw is just one example of consequences that fell upon workers due to a poor work environment.